because you're saying so many good things. You said good things over the phone. You're saying good things right now. So, do I have a special treat for you today? I interviewed a special guest, Doreen Benyamin. We previously did a workshop where she was the one asking me questions, but this time I'm asking her how she passed both the California bar exam and the New York Uniform Bar exam. We'll walk through how she passed the New York bar after just 1 week of focused preparation. So what makes this interesting is not so much the timeline because we really don't recommend studying for just 1 week, but rather how she tailored her study plan for herself. As always, you should adjust any strategy, including the one you're going to listen to your own situation. So here are three strategic moves that she made to get a score of 307 on the New York UBE. So first, she says done is better than perfect. She stopped chasing the perfect rule statements. Many strong students lose points because they hesitate when they're unsure. They don't know what to write. She stopped doing that. Even when she doubted the rule, she wrote something that made sense and moved on. And second, she began applying rules through practice questions much earlier instead of waiting to memorize everything. She didn't wait to feel ready. She learned through application itself. And third, this is my favorite part, she prioritized high return areas instead of treating every subject, every portion of the exam equally. This is essentially a modified version of the tripod approach for the UBE. She focused on where the points were most concentrated and accessible, low hanging fruits, instead of trying to perfect everything. So as you listen, try to pay attention to those themes and see whether you can apply them to your own preparation. Okay, well, Doreen, it is amazing to connect with you again. We spoke actually quite a few years ago, but we connected some time ago when you were studying for the California bar, and then we did a workshop, and you told me that you passed the New York bar as well. So you're a double passer, and amazingly, you passed the New York bar with a score of 307, and the MB scale score was 144. And you did all of this in 1 week of preparation. So I am like super curious about how you did it, and also I'm very grateful that you chose to came on and talk about it. So that everyone else can kind of learn about what you did and what they can take away from it. So um, yeah, maybe you can kind of give me like a brief background of like how what happened during that time.
Sure. So, hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Brian, for having me. Um, I'm nervous to share a little bit about my story because for many of us, I feel like going through the whole process of studying for and taking the bar can be really difficult. And like many of the people I'm sure who are listening, I'm first generation American, professional, like having to figure out everything about law school, the LSAT, a lot of it was really difficult and things I had to figure out on my own. So I'm excited to share the things that I've learned so that hopefully other people don't have to go through the same thing. And I'm really grateful for you, Brian. And the reason why I'm happy to do this, one is obviously, I want other people to be able to not make the mistakes that I've made. But also you have been very generous and helpful, and the resources that you provided helped me pass, especially with the 1 week for New York Bar, which I'll get into. But I'm really grateful to you, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to hopefully help people not make the same mistakes that I did.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I'm thrilled to be able to chat with you. So, yeah, thanks again for taking the time. I know you're busy now because you're barred in two places. You're a lawyer. So we can just kind of get into it. And I'm interested in kind of the overall strategies you've taken in both California and New York, and maybe some of the top takeaways that we can kind of figure out from that. And maybe we can kind of go in a generally chronological order. Um, so if we work backwards, then you passed the New York bar in July 2025, and then some time ago you passed the California bar. So we can kind of start with that, and then tell us about the lessons you learned, and then how that applied to California and New York and so on.
Okay. Do you have a preference on where we start?
We'll start with the California bar.
Okay, cool. So, I had to take the California bar, like I had to repeat because I failed. And as I'm sure many people know, it's a very humbling experience to fail. Um, because a lot of people go through that experience, unfortunately, right? I think 60% of people pass California, meaning 48% don't. And after going through law school and putting in all that hard work and then not passing, I think it just takes a toll and it's hard. Like for me in a lot of areas in my life, like I've always learned not to associate my identity with certain, like I try not to associate my identity too much with certain accomplishments or failures, like for both. I try to keep it a little bit of just because you do well in something or don't do well in something, it doesn't make you who you are. Um, and I think a lot of times it's really hard to separate your identity from whether or not you fail or pass the California bar or any bar. So I think I just want to share that with anybody who's listening who has failed or is afraid of like what might come if you're waiting for your score, if you're studying, any of that. It's a really hard, it could be a really hard experience, but it's a learnable test. And if you use any kind of failure as data and figure out like, okay, how did I approach it and how can I approach it differently? I think it can make a real difference. So with the California bar, I could say one of the most important lessons that I learned when I failed is I realized that I think I had enough knowledge, and I could see that based off my MBE score, especially. I think I had enough knowledge to pass. And what kept me from passing was overthinking the process for the essays. There was like an essay that had multiple subjects. It was a crossover with like three different subjects. And instead of just writing something, I feel like I kind of froze and thought maybe I could compensate by writing more on other essays. And that's really just not how it works. It's much more important that you write something, even if it's imperfect, even if the law is not necessarily like 100%. It's still better to get something down and write it out and get some points. Like this is all, if you could try to think of it almost like a game and you need to get a certain number of points, um, I think it becomes a little easier. So there's like the quote, done is better than perfect. I feel like Sheryl Sandberg talks about it a lot. I'm not sure if it's her quote, but done is better than perfect. Like it's way more important that you just get the essays done. And I feel like for a lot of lawyers or lawyers to be like you're just overthinking, you want it to be perfect, and that's not really your job on the bar is not to have a perfect product, it's to get it done and get as close to accuracy as you can in terms of all the law and everything. But you'll see even model answers that are not perfect, like they do not have all the law exactly right, right, Brian? You've seen that.
I've seen that. And
Yeah.
the fact is, there are like two different selected answers that the California bar puts out, and they have different answers. They don't always have the same issues spotted. They don't always use the same facts or even rules or the conclusions. So yeah, you don't have to be perfect to get a passing score.
Yeah, and don't I think like it's important um even if you're not 100% sure, even if you're doubting yourself in any way, just write something down and get it done and write confidently. They don't have to know that you're not confident. Just get it done. It'll be that much more likely that you'll pass. It'll be that much more likely that you won't have to do this again. So I think I would say that that was one of the biggest lessons I've learned from the California bar specifically.
Yeah. So you said a lot of wisdom, lots of nuggets of wisdom, and I can relate to a lot of those as a repeater myself. Done is better than perfect. That is very true. Like, I think that applies in general during preparation, during the exam itself, maybe especially during the exam itself, in life in general. Like, for example, my first time preparing for the California bar, I was like so into like all the videos. I was taking like meticulous notes, and I would spend like 6 hours, 7 hours just like transcribing videos basically. And then I would be so exhausted, no time to practice. I would just, feel like I was productive because I was going through the lectures and the videos and writing notes and all that. But like the point of preparation is to prepare yourself. It's not that's the point. The point is not to transcribe videos. That's like a completely different, meaningless, and very passive. Um, it feels like a lot of effort, but it's actually low effort because you're not thinking about where you're heading. You're just kind of taking what's given to you and not doing anything with it. You're just kind of like writing notes. And are you actually learning from that? And if you are, that's great. But if you're not, probably, then it's kind of like a waste of time. So, I think what you said about done is better than perfect also includes things like maybe not having the perfect notes, you can always look it up later. Maybe you can start solving some questions and so on. We can get into that later too, but a lot of what you said resonates a lot with me as well. And it is a pattern that I see year after year after year. For I've been seeing this for like 12, 13 years,
Mhm.
and people will not realize until it's like too late. But yeah, hopefully this video will make people think a little bit more about it. But yeah, no, thanks for sharing those things.
I would also say, Brian, if I can jump in really
Yeah.
quick, one other thing that helped me from your website specifically, and there were a few things, but one of them specifically that comes to mind as you're speaking is you shared on your website about how you would basically like, correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but you mentioned how you would like basically memorize all the rules there were to memorize. Like you really put in a lot of effort towards the memorization part. And that was for your first attempt. And then you learned for your second attempt to focus more, way more on the application because what I got from what you wrote is that part of the reason that you didn't pass was because you had focused so much on memorization that you didn't necessarily know how to apply it in different scenarios. And it's way more important, I think. Obviously, you need to know the law in order to apply it, but it's way more important to focus on learning how to apply it and where it applies. And there are certain like patterns that come up on the bar. It's a especially for the MBE section, it's standardized. So there are certain patterns and ways that they're going to apply it and certain situations that they're going to apply it to that come up over and over. Even though each test is different, certain things repeat. And so instead of memorizing the rule and not knowing how to apply it, I think it's much more important to focus on doing the questions and you learn it, especially, and we can talk about this more as we go, but for me, one of the biggest hurdles on the bar was memorization. It's never really been a strong suit or strong, I've never been strong in memorization. It's always been hard for me, like to memorize like large quantities of information. And so I think one thing on the bar that I learned about myself and taking the exam was instead of focusing on memorizing, I focused on doing questions. Like I learned the basics that I needed to do. I reviewed the basics that I needed to know. And then from there, even if I had like 40% of the knowledge that I thought I needed, I just did questions, a lot of them open book on both MBE and the essay. And doing it really taught me so much because it becomes memorable, right? Like when you're doing a question, there's a scenario. It's almost like a story. It becomes a little interesting, like, oh, what happened to this person? Like, why did they end up in this situation? What should they do now, right? And you kind of, it becomes a little bit more memorable. Also with the essays, like there's different situations and you can remember that situation and how it applied. And the next time you see a question, it might not be the exact same scenario, but one piece of it, right? One piece of it might show up again and you're like, "Oh, I've seen this before," and you can answer that based off of what you remember from the prior questions.
I have no corrections to any of that. I mean, there's like such a big difference between knowing something and knowing how to use that something. So like in fifth grade, we had like vocabulary tests, right? And all these like words that you know the definition to, but do you know how to use it in real life? There's like a difference between that, like knowing the definition versus knowing how to use that word in a sentence. Um, so I think everything you said, it's also like it's almost backwards what people do. Like people try to memorize and then try to use that, but
Mhm.
then if you know how to use that, then you sort of understand the concept and then you can remember it. And the
Yes.
point isn't to memorize, but be able to recall and to be able to use it. So just because you memorize, and memorization, as you said, is important, but that's just like the kind of like the baseline minimum like requirement. So yes, you do need to memorize, but then memorization is almost like a byproduct of what you do with that information. So that information turns into insight as to how you can use it rather than, oh, I have all this information. Like you knew all the information. You did pretty well on the MBE, but then
Mhm.
you couldn't like bring it up on the essays necessarily, right? And that's what happened to me too. Like the story you mentioned, it's like I could write down perfect, beautiful rule statements, but did I know how to identify the issues? Not that well. Did I know how to actually use the rules and like come to like a conclusion, like use the facts and stuff like that? Use come up with similar issue patterns in response to fact patterns. No, I the only thing I knew was just some words on a paper and just know how to recite it, but didn't know how to use what I wrote down. So I think our stories kind of resonate pretty well.
And I think like using things like if you're doing an essay, you can use I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Approsheets?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Magicsheets and Approsheets, like you can use it open when you're doing an open book
Mhm.
essay, you can use it and go through it. It literally walks you step by step on how to do a question. And even if you get it wrong, you'll actually learn more if you get it wrong once you look at like sample essays and things like, yeah, exactly. So as long as you don't let it impact your confidence, I really feel like so much of it is also psychological. You just have to make sure that you're doing it and not feeling bad about not knowing, because that's the point. Like if you knew all of it, what's the point of studying?
Are you reading my newsletter still? I feel like I say that all the time.
Well,
Um,
honestly, I really genuinely did learn a lot from your website. But yeah, I think this is something that I've thought of because I also like I've done a lot of like pre-law consulting, helping people with the LSAT, and there's a lot of similarities in standardized test prep, I think,
mm,
that carry over from LSAT or any other standardized test to the bar. And I think that helped me also. But I just realized like this test is so psychological.
mm.
Um, so yeah.
Do you want to tell us more about your LSAT journey?
I can share about that. So for the LSAT, I started with a diagnostic of a 148, and then I took the test 4 times before I got my ultimate score of a 174, which I ended up being able to go to Columbia Law School, which was amazing, especially coming from the background that I did. Um, but I think that also added, going back to like this whole thing of, having to retake this test after all of that can be really hard in so many different ways. So I like to be transparent about things like that because I don't want people to feel alone. And I think, Brian, you sharing, for example, that you didn't pass the first time you took it. I think you went to, did you went to Berkeley, right?
Not that great. It's like UC Hastings.
Okay, but still, like, and just seeing like how meticulous you are with how you approach like even just magic sheets, like it's so much information condensed on one page. And I think like to be able to do that, your brain has to think in a certain way.
So even with like being detail oriented, it's still
Yes.
not enough, I guess
Yeah.
is what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
It's like it's different sub skill
Yeah.
instead of just like knowing the words, knowing how
Yeah.
to say the rule. There's like it's like a different aspect to it that you want to emphasize, I guess.
It's fine. We can cut that part.
Um, yeah, so your LSAT score went up quite a bit. Do you think there's like a parallel between the LSAT and bar prep or the bar exam, I guess,
Um,
or how you prepare for the LSAT versus the bar exam?
I think the biggest thing was just modifying my approach instead of just like hitting the hammer on the nail the same way every single
Mm,
time. When I do help people with like pre-law, anything pre-law, especially with the LSAT, I just explain to them like, look, every time you get something wrong, in many ways it's a blessing because now you learn what you need to fix.
yeah,
It's the same thing with the bar. Like every time you get something wrong, that's exactly what you need. There really is no point to study if you're getting everything right. So, but I just feel like I think the biggest thing I would say from LSAT to bar is having the mindset that you could learn it, and it's just a matter of how you're approaching it.
mm,
It's not, it's hard, but it's doable. And I
yeah,
think just knowing that and also realizing, I think there's pieces like you don't want to use every resource that's out there. Like you want to find what works for you and stick to it. Don't keep going from one book to another to another. Like you can test certain things out. Like let's say if you're doing something open book, you could see what works for you and gets you to like write the best version of an answer. And once you see that something like resonated with you, stick to it and forget about other things unless you want to use them as like a reference, but not as your primary resource.
makes sense. I'm still like thinking about how you said to get things wrong because that's something I emphasize a lot. I even have
Yeah.
a graphic like representing that, and it kind of reminds me of our first workshop that we did that you invited me to. And then I think one of the things I said was, um, like pastors fail less over time. Like everyone fails to some extent, so you don't have to be perfect. First of all, it's just that the pastors they just fail less over time. So I feel like maybe that's what you did with the LSAT and what you did between California and New York. And speaking of which, we can get into that unless you had
Yeah.
things to say about
No,
California.
I'm happy to talk about that. So, one thing that I did for both California and New York was I used the tripod approach, which I learned about from your website. There were a few things that there was the tripod approach, and then there was also another woman named Doreen that talked about passing the bar. And I literally, just because we had the same name, I was like, okay, yes. I'm like, I don't know if manifesting is the right word, but this is like, what would you say?
Soul Sisters.
There you go. Yeah. So
Okay.
I printed out those two articles. I think I printed out other ones too, but those two I printed out and I would like reread them a lot. And um, I think so with Doreen, I don't remember exactly everything she said, but I think just reading it and seeing how one person made it work. There's so many stories like that, but just finding one person whose story resonates with you, I think can make a difference. And then with the tripod approach, I think it just logically made so much sense to focus on the things where you're getting the biggest return. And it also helped me prioritize because there's so much you could focus on the bar, but realizing like you just don't have the time to perfect everything. And even if you did, right, like in your situation where you knew every rule, it's not enough. So it's not like I think realizing that the bar is not perfect, there's no perfect standardized test. Like if it was actually reflecting your ability to practice law in a perfect way or reflect your ability of knowing the information in a perfect way, it might look different. But what you're doing is taking a test that has certain information on it and is organized a certain way, and people made it. And even though it's standardized, it's not going to be perfect. And if you just figure out, like, okay, so I have to approach this test to get the maximum number of points for the way that it was created and in a way that works with my style, with my study approach. Everyone has different things that work for them. So so the tripod approach is almost helping think in that way of like, okay, if I want to get as many points as possible, what's the most efficient way to do it? And even though that slightly differs for each person, I think, for California, you mentioned the PT, PR, and MBE, right? And it made so much sense to me. I was like, okay, if I learn all of the MBE subjects really well, first of all, it's easier to learn because I can do practice questions and they're one multiple choice question at a time. So it becomes very much bite size and it teaches me a concept, at least one concept every time. It's supposed to test only one concept. So you're learning a concept with every question that you get right if you spend enough time with each question. And then PR, like that's really important. Anyways, you're gonna have to do the MPRE. Like you need to know PR. Like it's gonna show up. You might as well just have one essay in the bag, get it done. And then the PT for me was like a gold mine in terms of gamifying and getting points because going back to like memorization not being a strong suit for me, I was like, okay, I know how to write. I'm a good writer, and I don't need to memorize anything really to do well on this. So, speaking about resources like Bar MD, Maureen Daniels, she's incredible. She has a lot of free resources online. I've used her paid resources as well. And she's just like, her approach was so clear. So I knew that if I did it enough times, like, and I used her approach, like I could just not have to worry so much about PT if I did enough examples. That ended up carrying over for the New York bar, but for the California bar, in terms of tripod approach, I followed it with the PT, PR, and NBE. I took it one step further in terms of like, there's an outline that the NCBE puts out that shows you what percentage of each subtopic is the on the bar on the MBE section. I don't know how many people actually use it, but that was like my Bible if I had a Bible. I printed it out and I would always like refer to it, and it guided me in terms of how I would approach each subject. And so, for example, for me, and I think for a lot of people, torts is a lot easier to get a good score on. Like it's a lot easier to get a higher percentage. But even within torts, every minute I would spend on torts, I feel like I would learn a lot more than let's say like for property where it's a lot more memorization focus, which is harder for me. Not that I wouldn't spend time on property, but I learned to prioritize the ones that were easier for me. And within torts, 50% of the questions come specifically from negligence.
Mhm.
So when I started studying, I focused first on like just doing negligence questions, making sure I did them really well, and then moving on to the next thing. So then not only do I have the confidence of like, okay, I already conquered 50% of one of the subjects pretty well, um, but also like now I'm much more likely to get more points and much more likely to pass. And so I did that approach. I mean, there's certain subjects where it's like equally, each subtopic is equally spread out. I think property was one of them actually.
It might
Um,
have been.
yeah, I can't remember. But and then like let's say for con law, I think constitutional protections is like 50% of con law. So it was like very different. I didn't really see a lot of bar prep programs breaking it down like that, and it didn't make sense to me to do it any other way. So I would just focus on prioritizing what I need to know the most in each MBE topic, like even within each MBE topic, and also within the topics, realizing some are more memorization focused, they're harder for me. And so I still spent time on it, but I prioritized the ones where I would get the most amount of points in the least amount of time before I moved on to the more difficult ones.
So would you say you prioritized your strengths? So you say you weren't the best in memorization, so you focused a lot on the PT, which didn't require memorization, and then within the MB topics, I think you said you like torts, so you spend a lot more time there, and by
Yeah.
doing that, you got more out of that for the same unit of time than
Yes.
with real property. So that's another subject where you can
Yes.
kind of maximize certain areas, like a singular area that takes up a disproportionate amount of the subjects.
Yeah, and also like um everything that I'm saying, like there was no perfect formula. You kind of have to really adjust it for yourself because evidence, for example, I never took it in law school. So that was really from scratch. So I put more time into evidence because
Mm.
I knew I didn't know anything um from law school. Like I had to learn that. But yeah, when I was doing it, like I focused on hearsay to make sure that I really knew and because there really is like it's a finite it feels infinite, but there is a finite amount of information, or like at least, let's say, probably I would say like 80% of the questions are certain hearsay exceptions or things like that that you need to know more than others. So it's it's not like a perfect formula of how you approach things, but it's it's it does matter to prioritize and be thoughtful about how you approach things instead of thinking everything is equal. Because I think that's how a lot of bar prep companies approach it. And it's such a shame because you just need to collect points and you need to figure out what the best way for you is to collect those points. It's not going to be the same as everyone else.
Yeah, and I think just kind of the overall theme here is that you trusted yourself to know what you needed. And I, I want to say, like most people, maybe almost everyone, they know what to do, but they don't trust themselves enough to do it. Like they know they should practice more. Maybe they know they should prioritize certain subjects more. But then, the bar prep industrial complex is so uh, fear driven and overwhelming and high stakes. And it's understandable. It's a difficult test, but it kind of touches back on what you said earlier. It's kind of like it's solvable. It's a solvable question or solvable problem. Um, when someone designs a video game, they're not trying to make you fail. I mean, you do, but then ultimately you can beat the game, right? But I think the bar exam is kind of the same. So you got to know the rules, um, and then you got to know how to play the game. But then you don't need to be discouraged because the game is beatable, especially as they maybe listen to your strategies or what I'm talking about now. They might start to get
Mhm.
ideas about, oh, maybe I don't have to actually transcribe videos for 6 hours a day. Maybe I could actually try solving questions, even though it's scary at first, but then the more you do it, the more uh, interesting it becomes. Like you said, there's like stories. They're like mini stories, like the MB questions, and the more confident you become. I'm not saying you need to be confident to pass the bar. It's actually like the least confident people who end up passing the bar anyway. But the more you do this, the better you get at it, and that's kind of the point. Like the point is to be competent rather than confident, because if you're confident, then you don't know what you don't know. Oftentimes, that was certainly the case my first time. I was like, oh, I got this in the bag. I know all the rules. But then, when I took the exam, even coming out of the exam, I was like, so like, oh yeah, this is like so I'm done with this exam. But then like 4 months later, I got a very humbling, result. So I don't know what I'm talking about, but I like the things you say kind of remind us that it is doable. I think that's what you said. This is a doable task. Um, it is a big task, but it's doable. And if you can trust yourself to know what you need, um, where you're strong at, where you're weak at, and then kind of adjust to that situation, your own situation. Everyone's situation is going to be different. Um, and I want to really emphasize that like it should fit your hand like a tailored glove. Like your hand shouldn't fit in someone else's schedule or someone else's glove because you tailored it to such an extent that your schedule is not going to make sense to someone else and someone else's schedule is not going to make sense to you. And that's how it should be, I think. And like Barbary, famous, whatever, Kaplan, they I don't care if they watch this. They have the exact same schedule for everyone, whether you're like a 20 something basement dweller or like a 40 something single mom or like a family man, 50 years old, 60 years old. Maybe you're retired or you have a full time job, you're working 80 hours a week. Everyone gets the same schedule, and that doesn't make any sense to me. So, hearing success stories like yours, which often emphasize the need to kind of tailor your regimen to your situation, kind of really drives that home even more. Like every time I talk to people like you, it's like the same story. I mean, not to say you're not unique, but like,
No, it's true. I mean,
well,
yeah, I
yeah,
see a lot of my story and yours, like, there's always a lot of overlap.
yeah. And everyone is unique, which is why you need to kind of tailor it to your situation. If you're strong at one area, then maybe you could, in your case, you spend more time to get more out of it. But maybe in some cases, I think for me, I spent maybe less time on things that I was confident about so that I could address the things I was less, uh, capable at. So you just kind of see what works for you just to play with it. Like it's not that serious. I mean, it's kind of serious, but it's not. You can play with it. You can enjoy the process. You can kind of have fun with it. Like the first time I prepared for the bar exam, I was like I was like a little nerd, like writing notes and all that. But the second time, I was like relaxed. I was like, okay, what do I need? And then I just kind of went after that. So just to kind of emphasize your story is like really emblematic of what I would consider that other people do as well.
Also, Brian, based on what you just said, I also just want to say I don't want people to get caught up in making the perfect custom tailored schedule. It's no, do you know what I'm saying? Because I know if I watch it, then I'd be like, oh, is my schedule good enough? Like
Mm.
knowing myself, and I'm sure that there are other people, I imagine there would be other people who could relate. So it's not it's and I don't think that's what you meant, but I just don't want anyone to hear that and think that they need to have it's not about having a perfect schedule. It's going back to the whole done is better than perfect. And the way that you know that your schedule works for you is you see your score improving. Like let's say you're doing questions on adaptive bar, if you see your percentage going up, that means it's working. Like it doesn't have to be this. And the only reason, also going back to the whole confidence thing, like I didn't have that kind of confidence to trust myself the first time, right? I had it just the other way didn't work for me. I failed doing it the way that people were doing it, same as you, right? And that's when I was like, okay, if that doesn't work, what else can I try? And that's something that I've had to do, whether it was for the LSAT or law school or the bar, like I've always just had to figure out because I feel like I learn very differently than most people. I think I can learn relatively quickly, but I need to figure out how to learn. And then I'm doing it the way that works for me, then I feel like I could learn pretty quickly. But yeah, some people just learn differently and you have to figure out what it is that works for you. And if there was one thing that I think would have been the most helpful for me to get from this conversation, I think doing questions earlier on, like having a baseline knowledge that's like even 20 to 40% of the information you need to know, that might be a little low, but just even when you're at that point, just start to do questions and you'll learn it as you go if you do open book. That's what worked for me at least. It might not work for everyone, but for me, I found that to be really, really helpful and useful. because I would spend time with each question to make sure like I really understood it. And once I understood it, then I do another question and another question. And I would also focus on like doing question sets that were in subtopics so that I would get really good at certain subtopics. And I feel like, for me, pattern recognition helped a lot. Like once I would do a few questions in a subtopic, you kind of see how they're approaching torts, right? Because you're not actually like this goes back to like you're learning this for an exam and you're trying to get points for an exam. It's not about who knows torts the best, and it's not about who can understand. Like it's how is torts being tested on this exam? How are they approaching it? What kinds of questions are they asking? What are they focusing on? What kind of hypotheticals are they asking? If you get exposed to enough questions, even if you don't know the full 400 pages plus of material that there is to know, if you know how it applies in that situation, that gives you a huge leg up and you can collect those points and move on with your life, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a limited universe, so there's like no
Exactly.
way that they can go beyond that scope, right? So the more you do if you did enough questions, you'll see the patterns come up over and over again, and
Yeah.
that's what you're actually solving. You're not being tested on whether you can say the perfect rule or anything or know all the rules, but whether you can, solve those recurring questions. And again, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get 100% to pass the bar. So if you know enough of those patterns, enough of those issues, enough of those rules, I think you have a good shot at passing the bar. Um, and you said the way you know how you are, whether it's working for you is whether the score's going up, right? Did you see that pattern within that 1 week of study, or I want to know more about how you did all
The
this?
1 week?
Yeah,
Okay, so one thing about the 1 week, because I don't want anyone to feel, first of all, I would never recommend it to anyone. I wouldn't have wanted to do it that way. It wasn't ideal. So for context, I was working full time at the time. And one of our coworkers had left and I had taken on his whole like workload basically, more or less. And that was like a few weeks before the bar. And I had gotten so caught up in work that I just didn't get to prioritize studying for the bar the way that I wanted. And like my job wasn't relying on me passing the New York bar. Like all I needed was what I already had, which was the California bar. And the New York bar was just, I just want to do this, have it, get it out of the way, have it done. And so if more was at stake, I don't know that I would have taken this chance in the same way. So I just want to say that. I don't want to scare anyone or give anyone false hope. The 1 week that I had, I was under so much stress and pressure from work that I honestly the whole week I didn't even get to use as much of that 1 week to study. I used most of it. The majority of it was studying, but I also just like was so stressed that part of it was just making sure that I'm not too exhausted to take the exam. Like I didn't want to exhaust myself. But what I did was like a modified approach of the tripod approach. I really went in on that because I already had the foundation of learning everything for the that I had learned for the California bar. And so my MBE scores, like it was mostly about like reviewing and making sure that I did enough questions in each one to refresh my memory and make sure that I like had a pretty solid MBE score. And then the next thing I prioritized was the PTs, like making sure that I knew how to do a New York PT because they're slightly different from California and there's more than one. So that really for me, I think was the tripod. The essays, I did more reading than I did practicing, which I don't recommend, but I just didn't have a lot of time, so it was hard to fit that in. And generally, I think essays for me were a lot harder because it just felt like so much more, it felt so more expansive, so much more like information that you could possibly know rather than MBE questions where it's like you have four options. You have a 25% chance. And I know people have really strong opinions about ChatGPT, like using it for studying for the bar. The way that I approach ChatGPT, again, like I realized that the way that I study is very different. And I felt that so much in that 1 week that I was studying for the New York bar, where I would like hit a wall. And I was so annoyed and upset with myself, honestly, because I was just like, I have 1 week. What am I doing if I'm not studying every hour that I have? Like how am I gonna have any shot at this? I also had to fly to New York. So like, it was just such a compressed timeline with but I think the fact that I thought it was possible, obviously like that helps a lot. I just didn't give up. I've always had that mentality of like it's possible, just try. I wouldn't like stop before I put in at least a shot.
Yeah.
And then what I did was like, okay, so like let's say I hit a wall while I was studying that week and I would get really upset with myself. I would just talk to ChatGPT and say, based off of science and what you know, like these are my goals. This is what's happening. I'm not able to like study or get as much done right now as I want. What do I do? Like research based, like what do you think I should do? And it would tell me like instead of fighting against myself and pushing through when my brain is like, okay, you need a break. It would say, like, maybe for some people this is common sense, by the way, but this helped me. So I'm just sharing it in case it helps other people. It would say things like, okay, just go take a 10-minute walk and then come back and see if you could focus again. So instead of telling myself, like, you need to study nonstop for X number of hours, I would just, I would set a goal. I would say I want to study from X to X amount of time. But if I found myself not being productive, I wouldn't just keep pushing. I would do whatever it is that I needed to do, whether it was eat something, go for a walk, like go, come back, and then try again. So yeah, I don't know how helpful that is for people, but I think for me that was really, really important of instead of being so hard on myself and having shame and being upset, realizing that like if there's a wall or a block, listen to it. Don't work against it and think you have to do how because everyone, like so many people are like, okay, I studied from whatever in the morning until this time at night and I didn't bring any breaks. I didn't go to any events. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And like that just didn't work for me. Like that's not how my brain works. My brain goes really, really deep for a certain period of time and I learn a lot in that period of time. And then if I hit a wall and I keep pushing past it, it's not going to help me. So I have to listen to it and take that break and then come back.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. So knowing yourself and knowing your study style is also part of adjusting to your situation.
Yeah.
Um, and we've been talking so much about like the substantive like study strategies, but the mental game is also quite, it's a big part of prep as well. So, ChatGPT, I haven't really, recommended that to anyone to use as like a mental support. You can use it for like explanations and examples and rule statements and stuff like that. But I think you hit a good point about keeping your mental game on track as well. You had a week to do it, so of course you're going to be stressed. You might
Yeah.
even had to like study while like on the plane too, right? So it's like you gotta figure out a way to keep yourself sane. My emails are kind of part of that. I try to keep it light and entertaining. So whatever gets you kind of calm and maybe optimistic and not so stressed, basically, right? So that's kind of what you use Chat GPT for.
Yeah. And also sometimes like if I was trying to memorize something, I would like ask ChatGPT, I would put in like a prompt, like, especially if it was really hard for me to remember, I would say like, oh, can you make up like a mnemonic that's related to dating or like some interesting topic that makes it more exciting? Like the bar, studying for the bar doesn't have to be like dreadful, right?
Boring.
Like you can make it fun. And I think like if it's a little bit more spicy, I don't know what other word to use, it's a little easier to remember. Like it really is. Like it just sticks better. So I would have it related to different like scenarios that were more fun or exciting or memorable for things that I just couldn't remember and I knew that I needed to know.
I'm gonna take that as a suggestion to be more provocative in my emails, even more. Just kidding, maybe. Uh,
Different things work for different people, but for me, that helped me remember a little bit more.
okay. No, I'm no. I really appreciate you sharing, these like personal things. I guess they're personal,
Yeah.
because everyone is different. So all these case studies that I share, they have different strategies,
Yeah.
and I never like say this is the way to do it. It's like there's like okay, here's 50 different ways to do it, and yours could be the 51st way. You may not even resonate with any of these, but hopefully they'll give you some ideas to start with. The tripod approach is probably something that could be useful. I think it's helped a lot of people. And I was especially interested in your modified tripod because the UB is a little bit different from the California. So I always thought maybe you could focus on secure transactions because that's like a difficult subject. But then you actually made it even narrower. It's like a bipod, I guess, like the MPT and the MBE. And the essays just kind of left it to maybe like a lower priority section because MPTs that's 20% of your grade, the MBE is 50%, and then some of the MBE subjects will show up in the essays, so it covers more than 7%. So once you have those two areas down, you're pretty much kind of halfway there, even more, right? Assuming you nail those down. For the essays, did you like ever like forget the rule and did you have to make them up, or what did you do if you couldn't remember what to write? If you got stuck with an issue or like a rule or something?
That was like a huge thing that I took away from the California bar that helped me in New York,
Mm.
where I just wrote. I wasn't 100% sure. I was doubting. I didn't know if I knew the rule right, but I just wrote something. And I think part of the reason why it did work though is because I really put so much into the MBE that it padded my essays. So even if they weren't perfect, like, and also I wrote confidently. I didn't hedge. I didn't
Mm.
say like, I really think that that makes a difference.
Mm.
I think it's important. And this is not, yeah, it's not like perfect. I don't think this is perfect advice. And I think it's obviously way better if you know it really, like if you know it cold and you can say it. But it was just like not an ideal scenario in terms of how much time I had and what I could do. And I just had to make the best of it. And so, you know, eh, but I think I knew that I knew the MBE material pretty well. And so that helped a lot. Like having that the higher MBE score, it gave me the confidence that okay, like essays are important, but if I'm doing pretty well on the PT and if I'm doing pretty well on the MBE, I just need to get the essays done and use what I do know and write confidently and go from there.
Did you take the same approach to the California exam with the New York MEE, I guess? You just kind of write whatever, not whatever, but you write in a confident way and I guess be sure to try to complete it in time, I guess. Could you take that approach in both exams?
For the essays, you mean?
For the essays, yeah.
Um, I did it a lot more. Like I went a lot more all in on that approach for New York.
Hmm.
For California, I did do it, and like I think like Cypress was on my exam, and I didn't know it was called Cypress, but I just thought logically, like what do you do in this scenario where the original intention is not like it doesn't exist anymore? So you just think about like I just thought about like what logically because the law is meant to be logical. So if you think logically, what would someone come up with in this scenario? It can at least give you a baseline, or at the very least, like you're just like not leaving it empty.
Okay.
So I think like I did it for the California bar, but for the New York bar, I was just like I wrote very confidently and didn't hedge at all.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe for California, it was like 60, 70%. And for New York, I was like 90 to 100. Like, this is just, you know.
Gotcha. And especially with the compressed timeline you have for New York, you didn't really have, I guess, that much time to like memorize rule statements. So you kind of had to use that um, kind of approach to fill in the gaps and use like policy reasons rather than like perfectly memorized rule statements. And that was enough for you.
But there, I mean, there was a lot, like, there was also overlap between New York and California for the essays. Like, there was enough overlap where
Mm.
that helped me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like your prior attempts really built a foundation for you to do this like 1 week marathon
Yeah.
prep and
Yeah.
then kind of get it done. Okay. Which is why you wouldn't recommend someone just start with 1 week of prep. That would
Yes, never. I
that would
really wouldn't recommend it. I've
okay.
seen other people write about it though. So maybe that gave me the confidence that it's possible. But obviously not recommended. Like I think someone wrote about like studying for the New York
Mm.
bar in 50 or I don't know if it was even New York. It might have been California, which is even crazier, but I think like 50 to 60 hours and they passed and I'm like, "Oh my God."
They were a first timer.
I think so, yeah.
Oh wow.
I
Interesting.
think so, but that's just, see, like the thing is, like you shouldn't aim for that or like want to do that. But if you don't have any other option, then believing that you can and being strategic about how you approach it, like increases your odds by a lot.
I agree. Like you'll run into constraints. You'll be put into situations where you have to do it a certain way. In your case, it was 1 week. Maybe for other people, it's like 3 weeks or something happens. But I think constraints force you to get creative and prioritize what's important. And yeah, I guess once you're kind of under that pressure, you tend to come up with solutions. So in this case, it worked. It worked out for you, but maybe we shouldn't, say it only takes 1 week to pass the bar exam.
Yeah, no, and I would also just say like for me, I do better under pressure. Like
Uh,
I have more clarity under pressure, so that also helped me.
okay, yeah, that's like another thing that may be different between people.
Yeah,
Another aspect to your kind of adjusting to the situation.
yeah.
Yeah, speaking of these two exams, did you notice any significant differences between the exams themselves and the way you approach those two preparation processes?
Um, I don't know why this stands out to me so much, but one of the biggest like differences that I noticed was just how it's administered. So California, I mean, at this point, people know that it can be a bit disorganized, to say the least, in terms of the approach. So like you show up at the test center and you might not take it for like if they say 8 or 9 or whatever it is, you might not take it for another hour. Like you're not even in the room at the time that you're supposed to, that they say you could start the exam.
Yeah.
Like you're still waiting. Like it's just, and it's, I feel like that's normalized. It's so weird. I don't know how that's possible for an exam this important, but, and this is not to say anything negative, but that is what it looks like. Like it's just like not, like it's not, you don't start at the time that they say you're going to start, basically. But you should obviously still show up early and everything, but just know that. Versus in New York, if they say you start at 8, the clock is there, and at 8, they're starting. And if they say you end at 5 p.m., when it's 5 p.m., that's it, you're done. Like there's no 5, oh, like it's so punctual and organized and standardized and like there was no this way, that way. Like it was just like exact. And like it makes so much sense when you think about it that that's how it should look like. But after doing California, it was just such a stark difference between the two of them and like also in New York they like let people bring snacks in,
Oh wow.
which I think is just I don't know. For me, I can find that kind of stuff sometimes very, very distracting. Like imagine like someone's like sitting next to you eating grapes in the middle of the
Yeah.
exam. Like I don't know. I didn't like that.
Well, they might have like answers written in the grape, like the.
No, it was no, but it was just like it's just so I don't know. It was just so weird to me that people can eat in the middle of
Yeah.
I get it, but it was just weird. Like I would get distracted if I was eating in the middle. Like I just want to have all my attention on just doing the exam. But like
Yeah.
yeah.
And I wouldn't want my food to be like, are they smelling my food and getting distracted? I would be like,
Like they have constraints on it. I don't remember all the constraints. They do have constraints on it, but it was just so odd to me. Like, because California, I think you could bring like water, maybe. And like if you have like medication that you have to take, like maybe, but it's so strict.
yeah. I mean, that's part of knowing the rules of the game, like what you're allowed to bring, what you can do, and also just being prepared for all possibilities. Anything can happen, anything can throw you off. So I think the exam is not just those 2 days, but like whole week. Like something could happen like the day before, or something
Yeah.
after. Your laptop might not upload your answers or something. So like the day you get to your hotel or whatever, I think that's actually when the exam starts. Like being in that state of mind where you're not too anxious. Kind of hard to not be, but and then up until you finish uploading answers, like that's like the entire exam. It's not just those 6 hours, 12 hours, but just kind of keeping yourself in a state where you're composed, where like little like random things are not going to throw you off, and you know where to get lunch, and yeah, things like that. So, did you run into anyone eating while you were taking the New York bar?
Yeah. Like the person next to me was eating.
Oh,
But I'm like probably more sensitive to these things than most people. Like I just noticed it a lot more. So that's why it came up. Well, that's why I even shared it at all. But what
Okay.
were you, what did you say?
No, I think I would get really annoyed if someone next to me was like chewing or like shaking their legs
Yeah.
or like breathing funny or like whatever. So yeah, I guess just like I preparations like being like 120% prepared so they can kind of fall to the level of like
Yeah.
baseline. Like you're not gonna magically get better because under pressure. Like you think adrenaline, the pressure, I mean it helps to some extent, like kind of brings out the best in you, but um also it kind of there's like so many things that could happen. Like you might see an issue that you've never studied before. You might
Yeah.
see um maybe you were trying to listen to predictions and then like the non-predictive subject came up, whatever. um Anything can happen, so I think it's just like being as prepared as you can to the extent your constraints allow you to. In your case it was 1 week, but if you have 10 weeks, then I think that's more time to consider all of the things that could happen. Maybe like having 1 week was actually a blessing because you only had to be stressed for 1 week instead of 10, 12 plus weeks.
I think I was stressed leading up to up to it, knowing that I wasn't studying when I should be. But I just it was too much with work. Like I couldn't do it. So, but
But
yeah,
then
I mean, it's still yeah, it was 1 week of actual like the actual studying part. So maybe that was, I guess, I don't know.
we also
But
like being under pressure. So
yeah, I do. I do. I do better. I do better actually with like constrained time periods of studying. But Brian, I just want to say like before we like wrap up or end anything, I want to make sure that I share with people that everything that I've shared today, it's not about like there is no one right way to do this, and I don't think that's at all what you think either. Like I think we're very much aligned on there is no one way to do this, and some of the things that I shared, like it might have been very, very specific or unique to my situation, some of it, like especially I think the 1 week thing. Um, but what I hope that people can take away from this, like one is just that don't let it be a reflection of your identity, whether you pass or not. I mean, obviously, if you pass, that's a great feeling, but either way, it really shouldn't. It's not, you are not whether or not you pass, like that's not who you are. So don't let it define you in any way. I just know for repeaters, like I went through it, I know what it's like. It's really hard. And even right now, when you hear Brian talk, like he remembers that moment so clearly. It almost feels like it was really recent, but how long ago was it for you now?
it was like 2013 that I failed, so
20, yeah. So
like
like
last century or something.
13 years ago.
Yeah, yeah,
So
last
I
decade.
just I think that's one thing that's really important is just mentioning that like don't let it become part of your identity whether you pass or fail. Um, and then the other thing is like the idea is not to listen to this conversation and be like, oh, okay, I need to do everything she said exactly this, this, this. And I don't think that that's what people take away. But what I would say is, I really believe in like experimenting, like testing things out, see what works for you. Because I read a lot of articles on your website, but some of them don't work for like it's just not my learning style, right? So, but I focused on the ones that did work for me, or like the fact that the girl's name was Doreen just stood out to me and like resonated, and I like took it and ran with it, you know? It doesn't have to be totally logical. If it works, it works. Like, don't overthink it. So but the tripod approach was, it just sounded so like, why wouldn't you do that? Especially because for me, I'm like, what do I like? This is so much information. I'm not really strong in memorization. I never really had to memorize in school so much. Like a lot of what I did was like writing or multiple choice tests or things like that. So, and if I did have to memorize, it wasn't like the bar is like almost like 400 pages worth of material for the essay section. It's like crazy. So, yeah, like being experimenting, see what works, and then run with it. If it works for you, doesn't matter. You don't need to tell people how you're doing or what you're doing. If it works, do it. And people will give you advice, and some people will sound so confident when they give you that advice, but they don't really know that much. You know what I mean? Like no one you can call yourself an expert on these things, but it's something we all just like you experienced it, you learned what you did, you learned what works for you, and we're all like we have a lens that's impacted by us and what works for us at the end of the day.
I wish I could give you a standing ovation, but I'm not wearing pants right now, so I'm just gonna clap. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Um, if anyone takes away one thing from this, it would be to, and people say this, and it is kind of like common advice now, but like figuring out what works for you. And I have like a whole article on what that even means because people parrot that phrase all the time.
Yeah,
But yeah, like you said, experimenting, trying different things. Uh, because eliminating, if it doesn't work, that's actually a good thing. You're eliminating what doesn't work, and that's one way to progress. Um, you don't have to have all the answers up front. I mean, there are certain frameworks and certain suggestions and things like that that we talked about, like the tripod approach and some of the other things that I talked about, things that you've recommended, resources, things like that. But not everything is going to be like perfectly. That's like the whole problem with Barbary and Themis and Kaplan, right? It's like so templated, so cookie cutter, but it's not going to work for every demographic. And like you're, I mean, it's gonna work for some people, which is why they're still in business. But at the end of the day, bar prep is self-study, so you just gotta find what works for you. And of course, we're happy to give you recommendations, like give you ideas to start with, but eventually you're going to get to a point where you're not doing exactly that, the things that we talk about. You're going to develop your own style, and you're going to have your own success story. Like all of my case studies are different in some way. So there's like a million different ways to pass, and yours is going to be one of those too. It's uh it's not easy, but like you said, it's doable. And hopefully we've given you some like basic like instructions on how to like get started. And it's like reading an instruction manual to like a new device you got. Like most people skip it and then figure like try to like see if it works. But kind of reading how the game works and how the device works is important as well. So we've given you kind of like some frameworks, and then also like the overarching message of kind of running with it, taking it and then doing what works. If it doesn't work, leave it. If it works, run with it. So yeah, hopefully I've captured what you wanted to say. And any other like last like parting mindset advice, jokes?
jokes. I think I would welcome if anyone has questions, like you're welcome to reach out to me on like LinkedIn or something like that. If you have like specific questions about your path. Um, I think like one thing in my path that I've learned is I just feel like I learn I've made mistakes along the way, and that helps me help other people not make those mistakes. So I'm happy to be a resource in that sense. And in terms of anything else, I'm just trying to see if there's anything else I feel like we covered everything.
Did you want to
Yeah.
talk about your events or podcasts?
Sure, yeah. So this is more actually focused on people who are still in law school, which majority of people probably are not. But um, I'm doing a series with the Daily Journal, which I'm really excited about, where we're speaking at different law schools about what we wish we knew before we graduated, or like what law school doesn't teach you. So that's something I'm really excited about. I'm also um, working on a podcast to like interview people about their career path and kind of have a little bit more insight into what you can do. So there's a lot of different things that are law adjacent that I'm working on. So if anyone wants to follow along, um, probably LinkedIn is the best way to follow along. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah, I'm happy to be a resource.
I really appreciate you coming on and talking. I know you're very busy now that you're back to work, but yeah, always happy to chat with you. It's always a pleasure, and hopefully people have taken away some ideas here. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to have been invited to be on and share my story after I've read like so many of other people's stories and case studies and advice on your website. To now be a part of it is really cool.
Yeah, and I hope people pass because of your our conversation, and then they can continue to pay it forward as well, and then continue helping the next generation of bar takers.